Hello, my name's Horrorama, and today I have found 7 dangerous encounters people have experienced with mysterious entities such as demons, jinn, and ghosts, and I will be narrating them here. But before we begin, I wanted to ask that if you end up enjoying my narrations, then please do consider liking and subscribing, as that really does help the channel a lot. And also, I have recently created a Reddit community meant for sharing and discussing creepy, scary, and dangerous experiences that you wish to be narrated on this channel. If you decide to contribute, then I would be very thankful. You can find a link to this community in the description below. And one last thing, if you hear any strange noise in the background of this video, then I must apologize, since there is a thunderstorm currently going on. But I guess that is quite atmospheric. But without any further ado, let's get into narrations. The first story has been posted by user Plantation111. So, to start off with a little information, I live in rural North Carolina, with lots of woods, decently spaced out farmland, and lots of critters. I'm also a little more in tune to supernatural things than most people. Like, my eyes well up with tears, and I get a spine-rolling chill if something that isn't human or natural is around me. Last night, around 1:40ish in the morning, I'm on a call with my boyfriend, with my bedroom light on. My bedroom has a large window facing the road, and from the corner of my eye, I see a blur of white dart back and forth twice, and immediately I get a churn in my stomach. My eyes well up, and I get a shiver down my spine. Normally, I don't really hone in on this, because I don't like to mess with spirits and such. My house has a few, and while I know I live here now, I also know it was once their house, and I want to be respectful to them and the place they lived and died in. However, I completely freak out at this, turn my lights off, slip under my blankets, and watch the window. The shivering is gone, for now at least, but there's a gut-deep feeling of unease. My cat got up from where she was napping by the window and left my room in a hurry. Wouldn't even let me touch her, which is very odd for her, because she's super affectionate, like a dog even. And even as I'm writing this, she's in my lap, purring up a storm, so that in itself was scary. However, my boyfriend has had experiences with supernatural creatures and entities, so I'm talking to him about it, and he's trying to help me understand it, because the negative, scary cling of this thing had me scared. And I'm never scared of things like that, because I don't really do anything to upset them. I'm very gentle with the spirits. Whenever I see messed up graves, I put the flowers back right after asking their permission, and apologizing for stepping into their space. I'm generally quite kind, or just not at odds with spirits, but this thing was lingering in my mind. It didn't feel right. However, as I'm describing it, I'm getting shivers once again. When describing its appearance, I tell him that the creature is tall, and then go on to say, and very pale. To which he responded, pale like me, or pale. And I responded with, pale. And immediately my whole body hot from a shiver from the first pale, and it was strong, slowly fading after I said the last word. And that scared me more, because I don't get that type of shiver when I talk about supernatural things. The conversation keeps going, and my partner brings up skinwalkers and wendigos. I'm not claiming that this is either of these things. I simply don't know enough. But immediately, the full body shiver is back. Fast forward, my boyfriend out of the blue asks me what his birthday is, and I responded with his birthday, asking why he would ask me that, and he replies with, asking for personal information is a good way to see if someone's been taken. At the word taken, my whole body churns, like I grabbed a chord of a guitar, pulled and released, and it's thrumming through the entire guitar. Later on, after I've left my bedroom, locked my doors, checked that all my cats are inside, and have rung a bell a few times, as a friend who is experienced in supernatural encounters tells me to do so, I sit down and I begin to research. It's about 2:30, and I typed in Wendigo into Google. I receive no shiver and get the information. I then type in Skinwalker, and a full body shiver is back. So I clear my Google search bar and exit that square, and nothing happens after that. However, I've been experiencing those shivers recently at night, when I'm swimming in my pool, and as soon as I get them, I immediately head inside. So if anyone can please help, I would appreciate it. This is not an emergency. I'm just genuinely curious, and Google for sure isn't helping me. The next story has been posed by user CBD212. No idea what it was, but I've never been scared this much in my life. I'm quite bad at explaining things, but I'll give it my best shot. I'm from the UK. Me and my girlfriend and dog stayed in a cabin on someone's field in North Devon. The farmer's house was about 1 minute walk away, but apart from that, it was just fields and country lanes, which look like they don't get used all that often. The cabin is in a field, with a fenced-off part for the dog to roam around in freely. It's about 100 yards of space, similar to a football pitch. Beyond this, there is an overgrown field with a lake next to it. I have always felt scared of looking out of windows during the night, so I usually shut my window and draw the curtains to feel safer. At around 2 a.m., I heard some movement outside. The sounds were quite heavy. Knowing that there are badgers and deer in the countryside, I didn't pay much attention to it initially. However, my attention shifted when I heard something brush against the cabin. It could have been a deer sniffing around or scratching against the cabin, but my instincts told me otherwise. Following this, I heard a soft grunt that sounded very deep. This was followed by a rapid breathing sound. It didn't resemble the breathing of a deer, as I can't imagine their breath being both deep and fast. I lay there, attempting to figure out what might be just a couple of yards away from me on the other side of the wooden wall. I then heard footsteps move around the back of the cabin before turning right outside my window. By literally right outside, I mean it was extremely close, though I couldn't see anything due to the thick curtain. Then, an extremely unsettling sound occurred. Tapping. Something was tapping on my window. This tapping didn't resemble any sound I had heard before. It was as if whatever was tapping the window was using significant force. It reminded me of the sound that a knife tapping against the glass would make. I was completely still and even placed a blanket in my mouth to muffle my breathing. The tapping happened again, followed by a brief pause. After that, I heard tapping on the kitchen window, and then the bathroom window. I was certain I wasn't dreaming because I was on the verge of a panic attack and was sweating profusely. The tapping stopped after the bathroom window, and I heard the sound of something running away, accompanied by a distant shriek that grew fainter over time. Following this incident, I remained motionless, not daring to make a sound. It felt like whatever it was had come to investigate and observe. Do you have any thoughts on what this might have even been? The next story has been posed by user Piddle1Cowfat. Did my colleague see a crawler? Could it be following her? Hi there. My colleague in the healthcare and research industry a few years ago called me from Johnson City, Tennessee, and told me they think they saw an alien when hiking with her friend in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Appalachia. I'll try to describe it the way she does. Emaciated, lanky, 4 limbs, but stands up around 10 feet tall on 2 legs, almost glowing white. Its movements when on all fours were awkward, like it is being jerked forward on an invisible string. Couldn't focus on all of the creature at once, like it was barely in this dimension, and a pure evil feeling emanating from it. Covered in baggy skin that originally she said looked like it was almost wearing a hoodie. No facial features, no eyes, mouth, or nose, and the skin also kind of looked inorganic. Number 4 seems to be something not talked about often when discussing this creature. She and her friend both described not being able to see it like one normally would be able to. It was like halfway into this world, halfway somewhere else. Neither could focus on the entire creature visibly at once. She said it looked like it was just running around for transportation, and not like it was chasing or being chased. It was almost like it didn't even see them for a few moments, until it stopped crawling, turned around to look at the two of them, and stood up. I asked if the creature was surprised they could see it. She said it was so otherworldly, she's not sure she could use that adjective. It's simply too human of a word for what she saw. She assumed it may be incapable of something as simple as surprise. In fact, both of these young ladies, each in their 20s, struggle to describe the physical aspect of the being, like what they were witnessing defied physics altogether. She admitted to me, 2 years after the incident, that sometimes she still feels like the creature watches her, even if it's not physically there. Anyone else have an experience with a crawler or something else remaining in someone's energy or psyche for so long. Any help would be appreciated. The next story has been posted by user A83Y. I saw a witch. Night 1. Me and my friend had to share a room with no fan or AC in an Indian summer. We opened windows to let air in. As we sat chatting, I noticed a shadow woman shoot past our window in the veranda. Mind you, this was 3 a.m. and everyone was sleeping. I say shadow woman because this thing had a shawl on, and it pushed past the clothes hanging on the line. Not to mention, it was a bloody dead end. The direction it was going in, it didn't go anywhere. We both went out looking, expecting to find someone playing a prank or something on us. But there was no one. We came in, locked the windows, and went to sleep. Night 2. The following morning, I woke up and discovered that my friend had already left. Unfortunately, we didn't have the chance to discuss what he had witnessed the previous night. I decided to call my cousin and invited him to spend the night with me. He agreed and came over to my place. Once again, we found ourselves sleeping in a room without air conditioning or a fan. Since my cousin was unaware of the events from the night before, he opened up the windows. As we were sharing a bed, I thought it was best to leave the windows open and didn't mention anything to him. Around 3 a.m., my cousin fell asleep quickly, but I remained awake. I couldn't help but notice an unusual light coming from a tree in the garden beyond the veranda. Initially, I thought it might be a firefly, but then I realized there were 2 lights. These lights grew larger and became intensely fiery. I couldn't divert my gaze. It was as if they had a hold on me. I began to sense that something was amiss, but my eyes remained fixated. Before my eyes, a manifestation started to take form. A dark figure, resembling a woman, appeared standing in the tree. I realized that the lights were not fireflies, but rather her eyes, hypnotic spheres of blazing fire. In that moment, I felt a sense of panic and curiosity. On one hand, I was filled with an unsettling fear, but on the other, I was oddly intrigued. I found myself in a sort of hypnotic trance, unable to look away as the figure gradually materialized. I observed her hands, with fingers resembling flickering smoke, beckoning me to come closer. She was draped in a dark shawl, and her continuous gestures held a strange allure. I wondered what she could possibly want, yet an instinctual voice within me shouted, "No, don't go there." Despite this internal warning, I could not resist the overwhelming urge that consumed me. Her eyes blazed with what seemed like anger, and I wrestled with the reality of the situation. Summoning my courage, I made the decision to make contact with this entity, whatever it might be. Slowly, but resolutely, I began to move forward. I remember thinking, what's the worst that would happen? Just as I started moving, I accidentally stepped on my cousin, who was sharing the bed with me. Startled, he asked, "What on earth are you doing?" In response, I told him, "The lady in the tree is calling me." Immediately, he grabbed me and pulled me back onto the bed, firmly instructing me, You must not. The next thing I recall is trembling beneath a blanket that my cousin had thrown over me. I felt on the verge of shock, trying to process what had just transpired. My cousin went to close the window and peered outside to see if the ominous presence was still there, but to our relief, it had vanished. And thus, that unsettling episode came to an end. The next story has been posed by user Groovy Cakes 87. I saw something, and I cannot stop thinking about it. I reside in Nevada, and I work third shift. I go to many different locations and clean. One of the locations I go to has deers and bunnies. I've encountered deer before, and I know to keep my distance. Towards the end of my shift, which is around 4 to 5 a.m., my coworker and I are in charge of taking out the trash. Next to this location is like a field with trees next to a park. In this area, it's always foggy in the morning. I'm assuming that's because it's close to a river. We begin to bring the trash to the back of the building, where the dumpsters are. I was next to the dumpster, ready to lift my huge bag of trash, but something in my mind just told me to look. I turned to my right, and across the street is a very tall, extremely skinny deer with huge antlers. While I stared at it, I couldn't stop thinking, what's wrong with its knees? Its knees were just so huge compared to the thin leg bones. This deer was extremely tall, and it began to walk towards my coworker and I. Its legs were so long, and it wasn't moving correctly. The legs were just strange. Then another one appeared next to the first one. Due to the fog, they looked gray, not cream or brown like usual, but this grayish color. Their eyes were glowing, and they just sort of stared at us. I no longer wanted to look at these things, but my body kept telling me to look. I was afraid that they were going to charge and attack us. I turned to run, and my coworker was already running towards the door. They did not make any sound. These deer were extremely quiet. Something just wasn't right. They gave me an extremely uncanny feeling. These things were well over 6 feet tall. The next story is posed by user Bird Still Water 319. I have no idea how to even explain what happened the other night. Okay, so I'm going to start off by saying that I have never experienced anything like this before, and I don't think I will ever again. This is a throwaway, because I have no idea what these people had in mind when I encountered them. I live near a small town that's on the water. It has a nice view and a bay area where people like to bring towels to lay down and just hang out. The other day my good buddy asked if I wanted to go to the beach and smoke a little. He picked me up and we made our way to the bay. It wasn't even that late, only around 5 p.m. We got there, and to our surprise, it was completely empty. Usually people are around, listening to music or in the water, but there was nothing. Weirdly silent. Of course though, we thought nothing of it. In fact, we were actually pretty happy we had our own little private beach. He brought a small speaker, so we began to listen to some music, sparked up, and just lie down. We talked for a bit and then we both eventually fell asleep. This is where things become a bit strange. I awake from my nap to my buddy tapping me on the shoulder and pointing to three people about 50 feet away from us. They were just staring at us. They weren't even moving, just standing still. No towels in hand, not even dressed for the beach. Normal clothes, normal looking middle-aged people, just staring. It was two women and one guy, obviously still a bit high. We were both a bit concerned and decided to call it quits. We started packing our smoking paraphernalia and started to walk back. As we stand up from packing our stuff, we noticed four more people approaching and staring. We noticed that these seven people are now just staring at us very intensely. We look behind us, thinking they see something in the water, but when we look back to see them still staring at us, we get extremely uncomfortable, to say the least. We then actually book it to the car, trying to not look back at these people looking at us. When we get to the car, I kid you not, there were 15 plus people walking towards our car, also staring at us. No expressions on their faces. I felt like I was in a horror movie with zombies. My friend screams at them, but it doesn't even seem to cause a flinch. They start approaching the car, and my friend floors it out of the beach. I haven't been back there since that night, which was about 2 days ago, and I don't know if I will ever go back. Who were they? Why were they staring at us like that? They didn't even seem human to me. The next story has been posed by user SupportDan33. 3 times in West Michigan I have been visited by the same creature. Starting roughly 19 years ago, I'm 38 now, I was in the woods behind one of my friend's houses camping. We were maybe only 500 yards away from the house, and only took a few steps in the direction of the house to see it on the other side of the cornfield that was used for hay that year. We had started a fire, and we were just hanging out and talking and enjoying the summer night. We had gone to Lake Michigan earlier, and a girl we met that lived nearby decided to come with us and hang out, being our one friend knew her somewhat from his job. We all agreed she would get a tent, and we would all sleep around the fire. After an hour or so, we had an amazingly bright light shine down right over us. We all kind of wigged and then got up, but then a strong wind came down, and the light slowly moved away. We all decided it was some police helicopter or something, possibly looking for drug labs, and saw our heat plus the fire on the thermal camera. We all laid back down, and within maybe 10 minutes, we would all be backs to each other, hearts racing. As we laid there was an ear-splitting screech. Before anyone else could get up, something with some considerable weight hit the leaf-littered forest floor. Now, all of us standing, a creature that seemed no larger than a wolf, ran, not walked, multiple times around us before we could get a read on its location. The girl was now in the tent doorway, and 2 of my friends had almost teleported into the tent. They moved so fast in fear. At this point, the creature had stopped moving, but we still couldn't pinpoint where it had stopped. The only views we could get was it had a gray fur, not patterned, but gray with random patches of white. It moved more like a person on all fours, but way faster than even a wolf. We also realized that the helicopter we figured was the dope scope was still nearby. Not far, but we could see the stars being blocked out by it moving from west to east, almost like it was strafing. Another 10 adrenaline-filled minutes passed, and we assumed it had left. After another hour of laying there, listening and waiting for its return, we all started falling asleep. In the morning, nothing in the campsite was disturbed, and nothing was damaged. I walked back to the house to get some eggs and other things for breakfast. Nothing felt off, except for the constant feeling of being watched from the woods. But after that long night, I could understand it as just my mind playing tricks on me. On the way back though, at a different angle of view, I noticed 3 distinct areas in the hay that were pressed down in an almost perfect triangle. Once I got closer, there was a static feeling to the air, and all of my hair stood up. As I got closer to the woods, a strong feeling to turn around hit me like a ton of bricks. Across the field, around 250 yards away, there is a piece of wood that splits the 2 fields. In that narrow strip of trees stood a cross between a dog and a great ape about 6 to 7 feet tall, standing on 2 legs. It seemed, I'd say, uncomfortable being on 2 legs, as it swayed side to side like it was unbalanced. I turned back and headed to the campsite and made breakfast, saying nothing to the rest, as heading back to the house would have us going right by the creature. Roughly 3 hours later, we decided to head to the house, and there was no sightings or any off feelings. The next sighting occurred about 4 years later while I was hunting on family property. Approximately 4 miles from the original sighting, sitting alone in the woods near Swan Creek, had a group of 4 does come in. I was in thicker woods, but had a 270 rifle sighted in at 100 yards. I had 3 optimal shooting lanes for the rifle, but 2 years prior, I made a difficult shot on a buck only 75 yards away, threading a needle with a bullet, so I was confident with any shot. The does were calm, moving slowly as they fed with no care in the world. After several minutes, the largest doe kept checking behind them, as if hearing something, but I couldn't hear anything. Suddenly they all jumped and ran, crushing into trees in their haste to get away, but still I couldn't hear anything, and neither could I see anything in the direction they were looking. Slowly, I noticed a gray and white creature moving like a hunting canine. As I got a good look, I immediately recognized it. This time, however, I felt calm and composed, unlike the anxiety-ridden first encounter. It moved through the woods, seemingly aware of my presence. It moved behind dense underbrush and leaped through shooting lanes, trying to stay hidden and avoid giving me a shot. I had a strong belief that cryptids and paranormal interactions should be treated with caution, and forceful actions should always be a last resort. It only emitted a very low growl as it would have entered a field about 75 yards away from me. I waited around 30 minutes before heading in for the night, as the creature's presence would have kept other animals away anyways. As I walked back, I never felt the need to rush or look behind me. Upon entering a small grass field we let grow on the property, there was once again a rush of wind and a dark object in the sky, which I could see better this time. It was a triangular-shaped object with round sides, almost like a filled triangle, and the sides were about to burst. The object moved slowly in the same direction as the creature had moved, then quickly disappeared in the opposite direction. The last time I had an interaction with a creature was only 3 years ago, but this time it was approximately 50 to 55 miles to the south. I was hunting in Allegan State Game Area, only a few days into the firearm season. Anyone familiar with that area during deer season knows it's filled with hunters from all over. I typically sought out more challenging areas, as city people often hunted closer to vehicles without putting in much effort. On this day, as the sun was just starting to rise and break through the dense trees, something felt odd. I hadn't seen any other cars on my way to the area, so I felt quite confident about a successful hunt. As the minutes passed, I could hear a few deer moving, and I hoped a buck would follow. It was cooler that morning than the previous few, and I could see my breath. Suddenly, I noticed the breath coming from behind some berry shrubs, where I assumed the deer were. I eagerly awaited their emergence, but after 10 minutes, they hadn't appeared, and the breathing persisted from the same spot. I began to think that maybe a buck was behind the shrubs, sensing my presence somehow. Then, all the does bolted through the opening by the shrubs, sprinting through the woods. Shortly behind them was a sight I had almost completely forgotten, and this time it triggered a surge of panic and anxiety. With no immediate threat to me, my fight or flight response kicked in, and I panicked about what to do. I was deep in the woods, around 1,000 yards away from my vehicle, with numerous hollows and ridges to traverse. There was no hunting buddy with me to provide assistance. Despite having my shotgun, I wasn't sure if I was truly safe, even with a weapon. I moved about 150 yards, taking care to not make noise, and checking my phone for better service to call my in-laws for assistance. I was about 200 yards from my vehicle when I saw what I thought might be my end. On a small mound about 75 yards ahead, a creature stood on all fours. This one was different. It had brown and black hair, appeared larger, and its front half was fully visible. It was the same kind of beast I had encountered before, a hybrid of a great ape and a wolf. I pondered if it was some kind of test tube creation from a mad scientist. The creature stared directly at me for about 5 minutes, and I was sure the other creature was nearby, observing me from a distance. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind swept through the area, and the creature bolted away, as if being pursued. I leaned against a tree, breathed a sigh of relief, and felt a rush of protection wash over me. I opened my eyes and looked up at the sky, which was distorted and morphed, like glass with a curve, or defect that distorts the view of objects behind it. I knew it was another craft flying above the trees, different from the previous ones. It was either an entirely different craft or a different mechanism used to hide, considering it was daylight. Now, here comes the most intriguing part. For about 2 years following these encounters, I had what I can only describe as ghost-like visits from these creatures. It's really the only way I can explain it. Both creatures would manifest in my woods while I was collecting firewood or walking with my kids. These experiences felt more like memories playing in my head. Although the creatures moved and did things that I didn't physically witness. One day I had my dog with me. A dog I had trained to protect my kids and my ex-wife. He had even lunged at me when my ex had taken him into the woods on a leash. On this particular day, I put on a new hoodie and pulled the hood over my face. Without warning, my dog's hair stood on end, and he started growling. He seemed perplexed by his own behavior. But then I saw both creatures about 20 feet ahead, appearing as if made of smoke. My dog lunged at one, passing through it, and it dissipated like mist thinning in the morning sun. The other creature moved behind a tree and never emerged on the other side. Several years have passed, and I haven't had full-fledged sightings of the creatures since. However, I continue to see shadows at the edge of my vision that resemble them. These shadows keep getting closer on both sides each time. My biggest challenge is understanding how an experience that started as a seemingly physical interaction with what I assumed were cryptids or otherworldly beings has evolved into more of a paranormal or spiritual interaction. It's almost as if their presence feels like a soul following me. Could they have transitioned into a different state? Or are they projecting their presence to me like a calling? I have held on to these experiences for years, only sharing them now, and I'm curious if others have had similarly bizarre and evolving interactions that span decades. None of these experiences have significantly disrupted my life, although a few nights of anxiety and sleeplessness followed some of the encounters. Feel free to comment or not. I felt the need to put my encounters out there and hope to connect with people who may have had similar, long-lasting, and transformative experiences. I'm intrigued by the transition from physical encounters to more spectral ones over time, and hope to gain insights or perspective from others. As we conclude our journey, the lingering whispers of unspeakable horror remind us of the darkness that exists within the unknown. From eldritch beings to otherworldly apparitions, we've ventured into a realm where terror reigns. As we return, may these spine-tingling encounters serve as a chilling reminder of the boundary between reality and the nightmare. But either way, I do hope you enjoyed my narrations, and even if you didn't, I want to wish you a good rest of your day.